Well, they got his tax returns. No, not those returns, but it's still interesting. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, the New York Times has come into possession of not exactly tax returns, but IRS transcripts of returns ranging in time from 1985 to 1994 for the current president of the United States, then just a real estate developer from New York. And I shouldn't say just a real estate developer, because according to these tax returns, during that span of time, Donald Trump, who in 1987 published a barn burner of a book called The Art of a Deal, which celebrated him as this great business hero, managed to somehow show business losses over $1 billion, $1.17 billion in losses between 1985 and 1994. And I guess the first question is the one that the Trump administration has been touting is, Bill, does anybody really care?
No. I mean, some people care fanatically, but these are the people that think that the Mueller report is still got big things to reveal. And when the truth really comes out, then we're going to see the perp walk. It certainly doesn't affect me. And I don't know at this point how it's going to affect anybody who's not been in a coma for the last 2-3 years, Scotty, you know? I mean, the story was that they had a hold of it and that he had losses. There's presumably, although this felt much more secure about the statement in the 40s, let's say, presumably they would have had reporters and editors really tear into what they had to see if there was anything genuinely newsworthy there before they published it. But if all they published is that Donald Trump showed losses during those years, okay. Look, if you really want to see some magical accounting, just randomly walk down any sidewalk in Beverly Hills, find the nearest production company you can, and take a look at their books. So unless the Times is saying, hey, we've got a hold of these tax returns for this particular period, which is interesting, but how they got them in the first place, but put that aside. Unless they say, and we see some serious irregularities here, or there's signs of corruption, or there's this or there's that, I'm not interested. Matter of fact, I'm not interested either way. I'm not.
Well, Bill, there is a little bit more to it than just that he showed business losses, and let me go into a little bit of that. And I think when it comes down to somebody who is a conservative like yourself and many of your viewers, it raises a question of character. And because President Trump has already responded to the New York Times story, basically saying that showing big business losses on your tax forms at that time was pretty much a sport, that you could use depreciation and other factors to show a big business loss so that you could go back to the banks from whom you had borrowed the money and renegotiate your deal with the banks to drive down your costs from that perspective. Now, after saying that in several tweets that he sent out the same morning that the story came out, he also said that it was fake news. Now, which is it? Was it a sport or is it fake news?
It's both. I mean, it's both. The New York Times is breathlessly reporting upon the same kind of economic situations that they made the movie Wall Street about around that time, right? 87, 88, 89, something like that. So the Times is breathlessly reporting that Donald Trump used bankruptcy or the threat of bankruptcy or business losses as a means to renegotiate loans during the crazy 80s. It is fake news. It's certainly not real news. But at the same time, for him to say it's a sport is not breaking any bounds. You know, the whole me decade thing, the whole me generation thing of the 80s was predicated upon the behavior primarily of Wall Street financiers. This is like shocking news that during the 80s, people played fast and loose around the edges of the regulatory system. I'm not impressed. In fact, I'm impressed as usual in the opposite direction. I'm impressed with the fact that now the New York Times has to go to, what was the period, 85 to 96 or whatever, in order to indicate that Donald Trump did what? Claimed legitimate business losses on his tax returns and constructed his tax returns in such a way to make it more as favorable for him financially as possible. Color me shocked.
Well, Bill, I think there's a difference between, somebody seeing Michael Douglas in Wall Street saying greed is good, or seeing Leonardo DiCaprio, snorting cocaine off a hooker's stomach in Wolf of Wall Street. But we're talking about a guy who is now the president of the United States. And go ahead.
No, you're going to make this like the character issue, Scott. The character issue had sailed certainly at the latest by the time that Ted Cruz dropped out of the race. That was the end of the character issue, at least for me and for pretty much everybody else that voted for him. Certainly the intervening 2 or 3 years now have done more to say goodbye to the character issue. I don't care. I don't care. Are you telling me that he's a sharp businessman? You're telling me that he's an incompetent businessman? Are you telling me that he's a businessman who plays around the edges? Are you telling me he's a businessman who was greedy? I don't care. I don't. Did he break any laws? That I care about.
Well, more than anything, the Times story seems to paint him as a charlatan. And the Times story, to be fair here, is not making allegations of illegality at this point. They're just kind of laying out the information that they've pulled from these transcripts.
To be fair, they're just laying out allegations of charlatanry.
But let me give you an example of that charlatanry, however we would say that. Basically, what they're saying is that the losses that he showed were all other people's money because he was obviously borrowing from investors, borrowing from banks. But he engaged in this other activity where once he had this reputation of being a high roller and somebody who could throw around a lot of money, he would go in and let it be known that he was buying stock in a company. And then he would have his surrogates leak information that he was planning on taking a controlling interest in those companies. And that would drive up the cost of the price of the stock. And then he'd cash out sometimes in as little as a month by basically doing, it's not the Music Man because there's no benefit to the town. There's only benefit to Donald Trump.
Is that against the law?
I'm not making legal evaluations of this. I'm like Robert Mueller or James Comey. I'm laying out the information for you.
For the stalwart, untainted stewards of our grand republic.
But just on the face of it, Bill,
is it illegal?
Do you like the idea of a guy who's president of the United States who was going in and consciously saying, let's pretend we're going to take over this company, drive up the cost of the stock?
I do like it. Yes, I do. I do like it. I like it very much, and I'm with a lot of Americans.
Sounds like insider trading to me.
Well, is it insider trading? Is it? Because I have a feeling that if it was actually insider trading, that the New York Times would be saying something a little more than, oh, and by the way, he did this, which wasn't very nice, which was charlatanesque. There's a difference between breaking the law and playing hardball. And I don't care. What I have come to realize, and what I think many people realized long before me, and many people realized fairly long time after me, is that this guy has a flaw or two. And his primary virtue is that he is not beholden to this Democratic Party media complex, Justice Department, IRS cabal that is determined to tell the American people what's good for them and make sure that they vote the right way. I don't care. Now, if he had committed felony violations of the law, I would be that would concern me, and it should concern him too. But as I've said so many times, it's not like Donald Trump just parachuted into the presidential race, from some other planet. There have been people looking at Donald Trump's finances and trying to stick Donald Trump forever. I remember reading Spy magazine back in the mid to late 80s, where they referred to him as a short-fingered vulgarian and talked about how Donald Trump was going to be bankrupt any day now. And I was on the side of Spy, by the way, because at the time I was an idiot. And it was clever writing. And Trump said, I'm going to be here a long time after Spy magazine is. And I said, oh, I don't think so. It turns out Spy lasted another 2 or 3 editions, and Donald Trump became president of the United States. I don't care. And this constant, I don't know how many times we are going to have to go through this. I hope we have to go through this 1,000 more times, because it is nothing but good for us. Every time that somebody like the New York Times reach further and further and further out into the solar system, trying to find a shred of evidence that Donald Trump is not a Boy Scout, and then all of the country will get the vapors and clutch their pearls and faint dead away. is amusing to me. It used to be astonishing. Now it's just funny. And I want to be crystal clear on this. We've had this conversation many times. Would I like it? Would I think it'd be better if we had a person of higher moral quality who played more strictly by the rules? I would like that, yes. But that person's not electable today. And we've seen what happens to people like that.
Bill, when you say that character ship has sailed, I think there's little arguing with that. However, the question then becomes, what's to become of the conservative movement, or even the Republican Party for that matter, when they've basically said situational ethics is good enough for us. If a guy does what we want him to do, then we're willing to stomach almost anything. How does that ship ever come back?
Well, first of all, the ship comes back in the same way that the powers that Abraham Lincoln took under himself during the Civil War were returned to the American people upon the end of the Civil War, and certainly we are in as dire a threat there as we were in the 1860s. And I don't mean a physical civil war. I don't mean a shooting civil war. We got all the guns. It's not going to happen. What I'm talking about is for example, what we've just seen and what we're seeing now. We saw a government under Barack Obama that was so certain of its media cloak of invisibility that it weaponized the government in terms of the IRS and the Justice Department against conservatives, against half of the American people. And they were so sure of themselves that they got away with these kind of felony.
Yeah, but I don't want you to use this tactic again to bring in the sins of the past to justify the sins of the present.
I am answering your question. Okay, when the government and the means of justice have been weaponized against people like us who believe in justice, then the remedy to this is an extreme remedy, and anything short of an extreme remedy will not work. And so you really do have to ask yourself, as Lincoln asked himself, am I willing to bend the Constitution in order to save it? And this is not situational ethics. This is not me saying, oh, gee, I think it's just swell. I hope he plays dirtier. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that he's the only person in this environment who can succeed in returning America to the people. And I have not seen anything on the part of Donald Trump other than massive self-interest, which I'm okay with. What I'm talking about when I'm talking about people like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and weaponizing the government, I'm not talking about individual character failings. I'm talking about a concerted effort to take the republic away from the American people. That's what I care about. And Donald Trump has manifestly been doing everything within his power to break open that clutch. I don't care about an individual's ethics or behavior so long as they're not breaking the law. I don't care if it's Donald Trump. I don't care if it's the janitor. I don't give a damn. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the freedom of the American people to determine their own destiny. And this is the only person on the horizon who can actually make that happen. And he can make it happen because of the fact that he is a hard-nosed, wily, crafty, if you want to say devious, I'm fine with that too. He is understanding the forces that are arrayed against him, and he is playing them by his rules. And to the degree that this guy is strengthening the military and putting conservative judges on the court and all the rest of it, his personal behavior, while I find much of it lamentable, is of essentially no importance to me anymore, only because this is the world that we live in. And to pretend that it's not is not to pretend that it's not, Scott, is to go to the grave, in sheets of perfectly clean white linen. And this was an option that we faced in World War II. It's an option we faced anytime we play with opponents that fight dirty. Are we going to say, well, our principles are our principles and we will go to the grave with them? And so we go to the grave and the United States disappears off the face of the earth to be replaced with this most powerful state in the history of human civilization, the most powerful surveillance state, the most powerful military state. All of these things that America is for the force of good can easily be turned into the force of evil. And we saw it happening. We see it happening today. We see the director of the FBI. We see the director of the Central Intelligence Agency hiring people to make sure that the candidate that the American people selected for president doesn't get to be president. And if he does, he must be destroyed and pulled from office. This is an existential threat to the United States of America. Donald Trump's greed, his tactlessness, his looseness with money, his investment strategies, these things are microscopic compared to the threat that's actually facing us in this country. And this is why this is not a question of situational ethics. This is a question of keeping our eye on where the fight is. What you're talking about with this article from the New York Times is just another case of the people that are determined to rob America of its right of self-determination. It's yet another case of them doing everything that they can to tarnish the person who they sent there to break up this cabal, and therefore that threat to the future of this republic is so imminent and so potent that I don't much care about anything else at all. I care about that.
Bill Whittle now comes to you 5 days a week. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com who have contributed voluntarily from their own financial means to make sure that this happens. They're giving anywhere from about $10 to about $50 a month from their own wallets, their own hard-earned money, so that these kinds of messages can get out. And they are among the few people in this country that really do understand where the fight is and what it's going to take to win that fight. We're glad to be allied with them. If you'd like to join their storied ranks, you can go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this possible.